Blanche and I watched a PBS program this week on Buddha, the life of Buddha. And it was really a pretty wonderful program. It put together a lot of people who are really deeply immersed in the study of Buddhism, and those who are representative of Buddhism. The Dalai Lama was one of the people. And of course it's just helpful to reacquaint yourself with the story, because it's such a classical story and reflects all of our stories in so many ways, for better or for worse. Essentially, I will recommend that you buy it or find it somewhere if you want to watch it. I found it important. Of course, mostly what it says is that we all get sick and die. And there's no way out of it, in the traditional sense. But it also proposes a larger view, the wheel of birth and death. And it said rather strikingly, because I haven't thought about this so much, that suffering doesn't start with life and doesn't end with life or with death. That suffering is pretty much a part of the whole wheel. That you don't leave this world and eliminate suffering. And you come into this world from a place of suffering, and it continues. And the continuum is something I don't think we think about very much. Because I think most of us want to think that death is a respite from all of that. And according to the Buddhist teachings, it's not. You go from suffering to suffering to suffering, with, I think, moments of, just like in life, moments of peace and joy that are then taken away, which brings more suffering. So suffering is a kind of ongoing part of life, and Buddha looked at this and said, why? And how do I get out of this? I don't want this. How do I escape suffering? And he tried to enter into the Hindu practices of the time, yoga, meditation, and tried sitting still and quieting the mind and doing all the things we all do, and it didn't work. He still suffered. His body still had pain. He still had, problems, and so he decided to join the austerities program. And for 3 years he did all the things you can do to mortify the flesh and not eat and starve and sit outside in the freezing cold weather and do whatever you could do to break through all of your resistance to suffering. And all he ended up with was more suffering. Horrible, horrible suffering. And it wasn't working. Nothing was working. And somewhere along the way I described my own approach to or arrival at the doors of awakening at the realization that nothing works. All the stuff you try doesn't work. And it's only when you realize it doesn't work and it's not going to work that you finally give up, or as Rudy would say, surrender. You go, I can't do it. I can't do it. I don't even know what doing it is, but I can't escape this veil of suffering and tears and difficulty and struggle. And the minute you say that, something happens. Truth happens. Truth, you can't escape it. you're in it. But the strange thing is, the minute you know that and accept it, suffering alters its aspects. It doesn't have the same hold on you. Once you accept suffering, the doorway begins to open into something other. Once you stop struggling, much of what you experience as suffering is gone. The struggle is so much the cause of so much suffering. But it wasn't the end. It wasn't the end of the ride for Siddhartha. That knowledge was really essential, but he said, I've got to get to the bottom of this. I've got to get to the bottom of it. I can't just sit here and know that not struggling is the answer, because there was still this I'm going to call it the narrative of your being. And so he just sat down and said, I'm staying here till I figure it out. And he just sat there. And what happens when you just sit there? And he was no longer struggling. A woman came up to him the moment he decided he couldn't do it anymore with a bowl of rice pudding, and you've probably all heard this, and he took it and he went, wow, that is good. And it was probably loaded with carbs and sugar and all this other stuff that we think is really, but it was the stuff of life. It was so reviving in him. And that's when he started to feel, yes, he doesn't know the answer, but that felt good. And so he just sat down and basically was present with life, was present. And he wasn't going to move until the truth, the ultimate truth, broke through to him. And there's this thing called Mara, which is illusion. In many ways, it's, again, our story. It's our fears, it's our doubts, it's our hopes and our ambitions. All of these things that play around in us all the time. And so as he just sat there, they all came up. They just all started to arise, in somewhat sequentially in the Buddha's story, and mostly the terrible doubts and fears came up first, and he just stared at them. He just stared at them, like, why do you have such power over me? Why are you so insistent? He just stared at them, and they lost their power. He didn't fight them, he didn't criticize them, he didn't hide, he didn't, bury himself. It's like, oh no, I can't handle it. He just looked at them. And in losing their power, they just became, in the Buddhist story, all the doubts and all the arrows of anger and hostility that were throwing themselves against him turned into flowers. Because they couldn't harm him. There was no one to harm. There was just this empty, open, what am I? And then they transformed into seductions. The way life seduces us, I want to be rich, I want to have a beautiful house, I want to have great children, I want to have all of this stuff. They usually do it as, dancing goddesses, but our desires are so all over the place, And all of these things started to come at him, and he went, It's like you just get it. You just get how seductive and powerful the life story is. Our existence is. We come into this world with a hunger for it. And mostly what we want, what we're hungry for, is peace, joy, pleasure, satisfaction, happiness, connectivity, otherness. We come into the world for all of that. And by wanting it so much, we give it enormous power. And it takes over. And the otherness starts to be really important. Other people loving us, other people touching us, other people embracing us. We wait for the things that bring us happiness, which is, a rather ephemeral thing. What brings us happiness? Well, simple things usually, like acknowledgement, recognition, love, satisfaction, attainment. But they're all, as we all know, ephemeral. You get them and they're no longer working. You get the thing you wanted, and now what? You marry the person you really wanted to be with, and then you discover it's not the end. There's work ahead. You got to sustain this thing. Everything is work, everything. And so you then fear losing that thing, or you wish you could lose it, or whatever the thing is that comes up in your life. There's all of this dissatisfaction, there's all of this frustration, there's all of this struggle that we enter into, and we become caught in it, we become addicted to it. It becomes the story of our life, and it becomes important. And that importance is a real problem, because everything we do feeds that story, and we become denser and more established in it, and it becomes heavier and more all there is, our story, and it's all we think about. Day in, day out, all night long, our story is reverberating in our head, and we are suffering with our story. We are burdened by our story. And then, if we're lucky, we find the spiritual path. The spiritual path. Let's pick Buddhism. And Buddhism said the middle way. Don't go into austerities. You don't have to meditate your way out of all of this. Just live the middle path. But if we've become true Buddhists, let's say, and we just live our life in real non-dualistic openness, that's all fine and dandy, except there's something in all of us that says, oh, I'm living the middle path. I'm a good person. I'm a Buddhist. I am this as opposed to that. I am this simple, wonderful, pure being, or I'm trying to be that. And that becomes the story. And the new I is no longer about your suffering. It's like, oh, I've escaped from suffering. Oh, I'm such a sweetheart. Oh, I do the good deeds. Oh, whatever that is. And then it becomes its own suffering. It becomes a weight, because you have, in choosing to be this person, separated yourself from everybody else. You now are a good person, and they're not. And the only way you know you're a good person is because they're not. So you really have to have people around you who are not good, or who are not loving, or who are not whatever, so you can judge yourself to be that, better than that. Whatever it is, your story is absolutely catching you. It's got you caught. And what happened to Buddha sitting under that tree, he had a determination not to be spiritual, not to be a good yogi, not to be austere and walk around with the pride of austerity, which is what all of his friends did. He just said, it's not that. It's not that. It's something very simple. And it is this middle path, but it's not something you hold on to, or you arrive at, or you achieve. It's just what is. You are this simple thing. Simple is maybe the wrong word. You are this amazing thing, which accrues stories, which tells itself stories. But if you are blessed, and if you have petitioned the universe strongly enough, long enough, and hard enough, it does this remarkable thing. It knocks your story out of whack. It throws it away. You cannot achieve that on your own. Nobody can achieve it on their own. It's not doable. It's not doable. But what you can do, And I think what is essential is truly, deeply, honestly, maturely, sincerely ask for help to surrender. That's what you can do. Say, I cannot do this alone. I petition you, I ask, I knock, I seek for your grace. Just the constancy of that, if you can understand the constancy of the knocking and it's not, I mean, look, you can make a big raging noise if you want, and that's not a bad thing if you're falling asleep all the time. You can say, I need help, but you can also just go, thy will be done, thy will be done, thy will be done. And you bring yourself to a place of true service, where you are available to the moment, you're available to the truth, you're available to reality, and you make yourself present. You just make yourself present. You almost have to will it, in a sense, at first. It's really what Rudy taught us. You know, you have to ask over and over and over again for help to surrender. But at some point, surrender happens. At some point, you just give up because you can't surrender, but you can give up trying to surrender, which is surrender. You give up trying, you just go, this is what it is. This is all there is, this. And you just go yes to this. And what happens when you do that is the very thing you've been seeking reveals itself to have been there all the time. It's just there. And then if the blessing of awakening occurs, the story dissolves and all of your stuff dissolves with it. If you can imagine the gift of that, because I look into everybody's eyes, and I see the weight of your story. It's so heavy. It's so heavy. Everybody's story is so heavy. I mean, some are sweeter than others and some are lighter than others, but almost everybody's story is heavy. And as you start to get to my age, it gets heavier. It gets heavier because your body is starting to yell its story at you, you know, the failures of your life and the successes which didn't last and all this stuff, or like my case, having to give up my home and, you know, all of these things that are starting to take place, illnesses which is starting to come into the picture, becomes part of the story. And so it becomes really hard. And then there's the falling away of the story. Awakening eliminates your attachment to all of the stuff that you suffer. It doesn't mean the propensity for it isn't there. It doesn't mean it won't keep coming back and weaving itself back into the picture, but it will keep going. It doesn't even that matter. It does not that it does it. There's something in you that just knows, and you return over and over to this knowing that that story has no power. It's the power you give it. And you look at your own self. I look at myself, let me be specific, and the story of giving up my house. You know, my career fell away, no problem for me. No problem. I let it go with a kind of joy. My spiritual life, and I've talked about this before, fell away. I no longer want a life of piety and trying to be something. I don't want that. It's no longer about any of that. It's about just being, which turns out to be an amazing spiritual life. But it's not a spiritual life that defines you. It's just what is. It's what we all have and don't know. So there's this simplicity of being that comes over you. And then here's the body. Here's people who knew you when. Here's the stuff of old patterns that all keeps kind of come back at you. And there's all this stuff that keeps wanting to weave its way in. And there's the history of human beings which take that stuff the minute it arises and starts to play with it. And then if you've had an awakening, you just go, what am I doing? What is this? And you go, no. Gone. But if you haven't had an awakening, you're and it's this endless struggle and battle with this thing, and you can't let go, and it owns you. It just owns you. And all I want to do as a teacher is tell you my story, tell you better Buddha's story, because it's the same basic idea and the same basic story, and it's your story. That's what's so important. It's your story. And Buddha walked around wanting to tell this story to everybody because he wanted everyone to just go, oh, done. Free of this crazy thing, this life storytelling that makes it all so powerful. And you take the story, some of us we have these horrible stories, really painful stories. Imagine something going, done. Stupid story. I don't have to live that story. That's a big deal. It can fall away. Now, your mind is going to come back and say, but if it falls away, I won't have a job. And I won't have any money. And I don't know how I'll eat. And I don't know what will happen next. And all of the doubt and fear, that's what Buddha sat with when they took away his story. But how will I get by? What will I do? And he sat under the Bo tree with all of that stuff coming up, and it all just kind of melted away because it didn't matter. Thy will be done. If you stand up from the Bo tree and there's no food, then you'll die. If there's no money, you're going to live differently. You'll do something. Your body will be there. Your body hasn't gone anywhere. You're still going to deal with this stuff. And yes, you may have some uncomfortable aspects to all of that. No money is different than some money. No one to love you is probably not as good as someone to love you. But what starts to come through is thy will be done is not a passive thing. Thy is present. Thy, yourself, is there. And it is the very thing you have been looking for from the beginning. You look for it in others. You look for it in pleasure. You look for it in sex. You look for it in wealth. You look for it in the magnificence of your life. But it's there in the poverty of your life. It's there in the absence of your life. It's always there, and it reveals itself to you as presence. And you go, oh, it's there. Thy will be done. It will do what it needs to do through you. And it will take care of you in whatever way. It will not remove you from physical pain. It will not remove you from the experience of death. It will not mean there won't be things that go on in your life that are hard to look at and painful. It also doesn't mean you won't have more joy and pleasure and who knows what will come. But you will look at all of it differently. You won't be looking at it as, oh, the reward of my sacrifice. Oh, I finally got this. Or, oh my God, the punishment. None of that. None of that. You just go, aha. It's like this great movie. It's this great, great movie. And these scenes come up and you watch them and they play, but it's just watching the movie. And I know it's hard to believe because we're so caught in it. We're so invested in the drama of our story. But if you could imagine that I could come in, or someone could come in with this big Gordian knot sword and go, and your story goes, you're free. And what do most people do? Go, oh my God, I don't want that. I don't want to be free. What do I do now if I'm free? You don't know. But that's the beginning of your spiritual life. Freedom is the beginning of your spiritual life. And it's not you who are free, it's freedom that exists. There is just freedom, and there's just being. And then you step naked into the world and you live your life without knowing, without certainty, with nothing except presence. It's really, it's potent. Truth, reality, presence are potent. And what's in the middle of that potency is love. And what comes up for you when you're not in that space? Doubt, fear, pain, suffering, the desire to escape, everything, and our ignorance, which has us try to run away in every wrong direction. You can't run away. You can only go toward and find the truth. You have to have the power of Buddha to just sit down and say, what's going on here? I gotta know. I gotta know. And so few people do that. So few people do it. Buddha said, out of the millions who will come, 2 will get it. Why? And who are those 2? Who are those 2? Why not you? Why not? All it takes is sincerity and will and bringing yourself to the table, knocking on the door, going on the pilgrimage, whatever it is that tells the universe, I want this. That's what Buddha did. He just sat there and said, I want this. He had given himself 3 years of austerities. He had given himself 3 years of meditation. You know, we've been around for 40 years, guys, a lot of us doing this work. You know, he did it for 6. You know, we're available. We're ready. We can do that. We can have it. You know, and if they don't deliver the full awakening to you, live as if they had. Live compassionately, lovingly, intelligently, with some understanding of other people's needs. I talk about this, I gave classes on it a while back. Rudy's line, judge the success of your spiritual life by the happiness of the people around you. You know, you may remember I did this experiment. It was my job, if I'm going to be spiritual, to make the people around me, and essentially that was Blanche, happy. Happy. Whatever I had to do. And I worked at it, and it really worked, because what happened was, for a whole period of time where I really was consciously practicing this, Blanche got happy. And what happened was, the environment in which I lived was suddenly happy. Because Blanche is the environment in which I live, and it was very clear to me that's how it worked. It was extraordinary. Then I started going, when she wasn't making me happy, I go, but what about me? And that's where you run into trouble. Because once you go into the what about me, then you're no longer, then it's a quid pro quo, and it really gets you in trouble. It really does. What has started to happen in my life, and it's really been amazing to watch, is, I've described this before, but I've realized all I have in life right now, I mean, I have a lot of people and a lot of stuff, but what I really have and what's standing here is my wife and myself. And I have found in myself this wanting, a wanting that has nothing to do with conscious effort. I want to make Blanche happy. I just want to. And I also want to make you guys happy. And I want to give you so much. And I see when I look at you, when I look deeply into your eyes, you're not asking for it. You're here, you bring yourself to the table, but there's so much ambivalence. You kind of want it, but you don't even quite fully believe that you can have it. Or what is it? What is it that I'm looking for? What do I want? I can't even tell you. I can't give it a name specifically. It's just surrender, thy will be done. That's what you want. But you have to practice it. You have to make the effort. You have to live this middle path that Buddha talked about, which is living, I would call it a righteous life, a life of kindness, a life of compassion and goodness as best you can do it, without trying to make that your identity. Don't walk around with the badge of, I am this. Because what you are is just presence. And presence has no identity at all. That's the amazing thing about presence. It just is. And its isness, or someone I just read called it suchness, its suchness is amazing. It's this. It's indescribably real and wonderful, and it's never ever separate from you. It never has been. It never will be. You are this very suchness. And once you know that, whether a full awakening takes place or just a way of living emerges, it's all the same. It's the same. You don't have to have awakening to live a life of compassion and goodness and suchness. And honestly, the awakening that took place here happened when I finally said, I don't care if there's an awakening. I really didn't. I don't care. I don't need it. I'm living the life that my teacher Rudy showed me was possible. That's what I'm doing. I'm living that life. Whether awakening happens, no awakening happens, who cares? And in truth, the awakening didn't do much more than make me realize I was living the right life. That's what it did. I'm living the life that I was taught I could live. But it made it, on one level, easier, because I didn't have to try to do it, and on another level, more difficult, because what is unbelievably real. And what is not always easy, and accepting what is not in our nature. What is in our nature is change what is into something else that you like better. Living what is, which is the essence of a spiritual life, is this is what you've brought me. This is what's come up, and I accept this, not because I want to walk around with a badge of, hey, I accepted the suffering of life, but because you want to accept it because it's there, because that's what is. Why is it there? Who knows? Who knows? I have zero answers. I simply know that we are in the presence of the absolute unknowable mystery, and it's unknowable with a capital U and mystery with a capital M. We will never know what this is, but we are one with it. And that's enough. It's enough. So, I love watching the program on Buddha because it just brought up all this stuff. It just brought up the journey he went through and the journey we go through. Buddha is not just a historical figure. Buddha and Buddhahood are our journey. We're all headed in the same direction and ultimately get there. Ultimately, we all get there. But you can get there tomorrow, today, right this second, or in 500 million lifetimes. And I'm talking about 500 million going through, as they put it in the show, going through high school and elementary school and all of this other stuff. I mean, you can just imagine the burden. Groundhog Day. It's Groundhog Day is one of my favorite films, and it's really the true story. We go through it until we work it through, until we figure it out. So figure it out. It's not that hard. Figure it out. And the really important thing is you're here now. You're getting the message now. How many people are getting the message now? Not a lot. Truly. Not a lot. It's a sad truth, but most people aren't even thinking about it. They're not even questioning it. You guys are here. Get it. Get the message. Get what you have to do. Slice yourself, cut away the past, cut away the future, be present, and let all the burden of who you were and who you have been and what you might become and all that just fall away and live what is. It's hard and it's wonderful. It's wonderful. So, any questions today?
So, what if people in your life are unconscious?
Say again.
What if people in your life are unconscious?
Well, which is almost all you see.
Right. Is it possible that making them happy would be essentially feeding their unconsciousness?
The only way to make people happy in a true sense is to feed their consciousness, not their unconsciousness. If you tell the truth to people, if you show compassion to people, if you acknowledge people in their truth and even in their suffering, if you say, I understand, I care, I'm there for you, whatever it is that someone says, that will make them happy. Does it feed their unconsciousness? I think it actually is a moment of clarity that makes them go, someone gets me, someone gets the struggle, someone gets the pain. And that helps. Does it feed unconsciousness? I don't think it makes you want to go back into the pain and the unconsciousness. It makes you see there's a little bit of a way perhaps out of it. But I mean, it's an interesting question. But I don't think the truth perpetuates unconsciousness. I think it's a sword that cuts through it. That's my feeling. You don't agree?
No. What I'm thinking is that it's pretty hard criteria to judge your success by happiness of people around you. What you're doing may actually disturb a lot of stuff in people around you, which does not necessarily make them happy.
Depends on where you come from. Trying to make other people happy, even in the worst efforts that you can make, will be better than not trying to make people happy around you. I can tell you that from experience. You know, trying to make people happy, even if you do the stupidest things, will resonate. Trying not to make them happy causes suffering, you know, or being indifferent causes suffering. So, if you have a choice, and we do, and you want a spiritual life, and you want to be able to reflect that spiritual life in some way, taking that on as an obligation is actually a fairly positive and powerful thing. And if you want to know that, try it. It really pays off in remarkable ways. But the ego has a hard time with it. The ego does nothing without wanting a return. So if it's all ego-driven, then it's only going to get into messy situations, because, like I said, what about me? What about me? And that's where it gets ugly. But if you do it from a surrendered place, or a real a spiritual effort, it's different. It's just different. It's hard to sustain because our egos rush back at us in such powerful form. But it's a practice. Spiritual work's a practice until it's not. And so you just practice it until it becomes a natural flow. It just is. And it's remarkable. I remember, Blanche and I still do this, but, you know, she makes the bed. I'm supposed to make the bed every day. Occasionally I walk out of the room and Blanche has made the bed. My whole day is changed by it. Whole day completely changed. Or she leaves my cup with my tea bag already in it for the hot water. I'm telling you, it's not just like, you know, why didn't you put the sugar there? Which I don't have sugar. But it's not that kind of reaction. It's a real gratitude. It's a real gratitude. And I try to do the similar, my side of the equation. You know, when we're going to watch TV at night, I make her a cup of tea and bring it to her. And, you know, and it's not, she doesn't ask me for it. And I love the idea that I can be ahead of the loop. I love it. And it changes how we live. It changes, these are tiny little gestures, but they make life different. And if you engage in these kinds of gestures, the thing you're seeking becomes available. The happiness of others becomes your happiness. It's just the way it works. And the unhappiness of others is your unhappiness. And, you know, I would love to go, if I could chop away your stories, I would bring, every one of you would be in a state of happiness. Or not happiness, but presence, which is bigger and better than happiness, because it incorporates everything. It's just everything, and it's so vibrantly real. And you go, yeah. And sometimes it's unhappy, and sometimes it's happy. But whatever it is, you just go, oh, it's so alive. It's so alive, and it's not alive in a little ego-minded, small-minded way. It's alive in a vibrant, huge way. And it's your life. That's what this is. This is your life. And it's like, oh my God, this is my life. And then even the crappy stuff, you get it. But there's a thing in you, I think, that wants to transform it for the sake of yourself and the sake of everybody around you. That's my sense of it. And it's dynamic. It's powerful.
To get back to your Buddha story, after he had his enlightenment under the Bo tree and he got up, between that point in time and the time he left his body, what's your perception about his work? Did he have work to do and teaching?
Yes, no, I mean, it was really interesting. He didn't know what to do. And the voice inside him said, you have to teach this. And he didn't know how. And his first person he came to was an old guy he used to know. And the guy said, how are you? He says, well, I've awakened. He said, really? You don't look awakened. You know? And he went through this whole thing. He said, there's nothing about you looks awakened. I don't believe you're awakened. I don't buy it at all. And Buddha realized, there's no way to sell that you look exactly like you did before. You're the same person. There's nothing to do. But then he found his old partners in austerities, and there are 5 of them, and he just told them his story, and it began to settle into them, and they all decided that they began to realize, as he articulated the middle path and the noble truths, that there's something here, and they all tried it, and it changed their lives. And he knew he had to go around to teach people, and he knew there weren't going to be a lot who got it, but the teaching of it was essential to him, and that's what he did. And then, as he got old, his body got achy, his back hurt, and his stomach hurt. 2 issues that I share with Buddha, and I get it. You enter pain, and he realized he couldn't go on much longer. And then he told this supposedly he ate a dinner with poison, with bad food, not poison, but bad, and it killed him. And he knew when he was eating it that it was, in fact, not good. And as he was imbibing it, he knew that it was going to do him in, but he didn't want to upset the woman who had prepared it for him. So he just ate it and laid down, and and told everybody that he will not be back, that he's done, and wished them all well on their journey through the wheel, and left. But he had quite a few years, like 40 years like that. And I always used to say, you got to understand, Buddha had hemorrhoids. We all you have a body, and it has all these afflictions, but it doesn't change the reality. The reality is it's life. It's life, and these are all parts of the yin and yang of existence. And it's not to try to get the yin, 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 and avoid the yang, yang, yang. It's to take the totality of what is and live a life with that, and that life will be revelational moment to moment to moment in the best possible way. It will never stop teaching you, and you will walk around in truth. Truth will come forth from you. You will occasionally come out of personality and ego, but often you come out of nothing. I mean, the guy who's talking to you right now is in no way Bruce. There's no way. How could Bruce doesn't know any of this stuff, really? But it's out of the Bruce body, and there's a Bruce attached to it, and it's the same with everyone here. The essence of us isn't our story. It's truth. And it ultimately, if we get out of the way, pours out. You can't stop it. Now, some of it will come out verbally. Some people are not teacherly, and that will not be the case. They'll just hug you in a certain way, or look at you, or be kind to you. Having met all these enlightened people, they're really fascinating, because some of them, one guy works at McDonald's and plays golf. That's his thing, and he's one of the happiest people I've ever met in my life, because he has no ambition, no need to do anything. He just does what he does, and it's like, I get that. And everyone who has this awakening becomes themselves. And I like that. It's just yourself. It's not to become special. It's not to become exalted. It's not to, live in a cave, and it's not to have millions of people come to your ashram and bow down to you. It's just to go through the day in this truth. It's all you want. And your truth will be, not that it's different from someone else's, but it will still partake of your story. And so you'll live a certain life until this one's over. That's all. But it's a great journey for everybody.
About the narrative and story. To me, it's like, I love to hear the stories. The people hear the stories. Which I don't know if that feeds that into being attached to your story. Because I also like to tell my story. It's like sometimes it's a lesson, but I don't know, so I guess I'm confused about cutting away the story, because sometimes I love to hear the story, and I love to share my story too.
Yes, no, we are creatures of story, and we do teach through story, and Buddha's story is a story. All of our stories are really important on the level of, we get formed into bodies, we manifest, and story accrues, it happens. But the story ultimately has one ending, which is illness, death. And knowing that changes that story in many ways. It gives it a perspective that if you don't know that's where it's going, which is for some weird reason the truth for many people, they don't think I actually am going to end up that way. I'm going to exercise every day, and that won't happen to me. But it does happen. It does happen to everybody. And when you look back at life from that perspective, it's really interesting how life looks. Life at the end, when you realize it just ends in this not wonderful diminishment of everything, and you look, my whole life was spent trying to get, trying to have, trying to do all these things. They're all being lost, every one of them. What was its purpose? Asking that question at the end of life may in fact be late in the game. Asking it in the middle of life could be very, very valuable. The story is all we have. I'm not trying to diminish stories. We should live our lives fully and have big stories, but we should also know that we are the observer of the story rather than the story itself. And only by finding that which is observing do we find peace and do we find truth. And if you think you are the story, you're going to be set up for death and suffering. You will. And that's just how it ends for everybody. The end. What was that about? You know, I had all this money, I had all this stuff, and they took everything away, and it's over, done, and it hurt. It's a problem.
Yeah, I was listening to some BBC program on the way up, and just for a moment they were talking about age and how people avoid thinking about it, and how young people love really old people, and old people love really young people. But it's the people in the middle that are scared to death of looking at the older people because they realize that that's right around their corner.
Absolutely.
And they can't deal with it in reality. And we're all, going to go there, so.
Well,
I think, we all have to realize that we have to love the old people too. Especially since I'm getting old.
Well, I mean, no. When you get to be our age, George, you start looking at people who are just 5 or 10 years older, and you go, "Oh my God, that's not like 30 or 40 years away." It's tomorrow. It's coming. It comes really fast. You got to start paying attention to all that, and we don't. That's what's so amazing. We could be our age and still not look at all of that, but it's all rushing at us, and it's requiring that we live differently, look at things differently, re-examine our lives. All of that stuff is really important. And what are we really here for? At the end of life, this is the time to get it together. This is the time to go, as I've said throughout this today, thy will be done. Finally give your life over. It's understood why people are totally lost in the drama of their life in the early years. But as you get toward the end, wake up. If you can wake up early, fine. But the end point is where you want to pay attention. Look at what it was, make peace with it, lock it all in, and just go, yes, that's it. And not to do that, the death of a person who's never done it carries and perpetuates all of the ignorance, all of the aversion, all of the fear, all of the doubt into the next existence, death or a new life, whatever it is. Don't do it. Just go, this is my chance. I've been given a life with Rudy. I've been given a life with these teachings. I've been moving toward it over and over and over. Let me honor it with complete surrender to this journey. And it's a remarkable thing. And they're going to work really hard. The universe is going to work really hard to make you do that. As you know, they're going to take stuff away. They're going to cause, all of this stuff that you've got to finally go, okay, I get it. I get it. You're taking it all away. You are taking everything from me. And basically go, well, why not? It was never mine. You gave it to me. You created this thing, and now you're taking it away. And I've been sitting here watching all this as though it was my own stuff. It was never your own stuff. You just got to live it. You got to be part of the manifestation of existence. Do you know how many billions of sperm fight to get that one spot? To come into this place and actually know this thing? To live it? Billions fight it, and one makes it. You made it. And here you are, and I'm not to put words in your mouth, but it's like, but why are they doing this to me? Why don't I get it the way I want it? Are you kidding? You're here. You're here. You made it into this unbelievable place of yin and yang, of good and bad, or good and evil, let's say, heaven and hell, all encompassed in this amazing space. And you've lived a remarkable life. I mean, you've had a lot of great stuff in your life. And like me, we're in the process of seeing some of it not carried on. What are you going to do? But like I say, everything changes all the time. There's no certainty. You get it while you have it. Make the best of it. Enjoy it. Love it. And ultimately give it away. And gratitude is a great part of it. It's essential. And love your story. Don't not love your story, but just know it's a story. And it traps you if you don't know that it's a story. It traps you in ways that are just devastating, really devastating. I mean, I see so many lives devastated by their stories. And I just want to fix it. And I can't fix it because they have to fix it.
I often think, just one of the shares, I often think, what would I do if, Buddha and Jesus and Moses and everybody walked into the room at one time and sat down, what would I do?
Buy him a drink.
What would you do? Would I sit there and go, let me think of something about my life I want to tell them? That sounds pretty stupid, So I just think that I would just let go of everything, I can, just try to feel what they're doing, maybe just absorb what they're doing, or their presence,
Well, I'll tell you, I had the experience, I've talked about this before, but many years ago of having a vision of Christ on a mountain, and I was walking up the mountain. It was really more of a hill. And he was standing there and opened arms and loving me like I couldn't believe. And I turned and ran down the hill so fast, I cannot tell you how annihilating his love was. It was totally annihilating, and it terrified me. That's what I did. Christ appeared to me and I ran. I don't know that I would do that today. I mean, I know I wouldn't do that. But I
I
ran.
found Rudy very scary.
Well, that was probably because the rabbi told him to do that.
Look, and same would happen with Buddha or anybody. If they come in the room, the truth of this and what it takes from you is so big that there is a ego fear of that. But the thing that they do ultimately, if they really arrive, which is shocking, is they take the ego away. So there's nothing to fear them. The ego goes, poof, and that's your whole story. This little, gone. And then there's just this. And you realize they are yourself. That Christ, Buddha, Muhammad, you name it, Moses, they are the ocean of love out of which this little ego emerged. They just happened to know that's who they were, and you didn't remember. And now you're beginning to remember. That's who you are. You will not see them as other. You will not see them as other. You will see them, in a sense, as yourself. Not with your face and all of that exactly, although you could. But you'll know them because you recognize this thing that is so true. You just go, of course. Every time you love somebody, and you're one of the great lovers, if you open your heart to love someone, you are participating in Buddhahood. That's how it works. Presence is filled with that. And so they won't be alien to you at all. They will be so familiar, and you will have such gratitude for seeing them. So if they walked in the room, you would just go, okay? Thank you, guys.